Birth of a legacy. In the year 1122, Eleanor of Aquitaine was born into one of the most powerful noble families in Europe. Her father, William X, Duke of Aquitaine, ruled over a vast and culturally rich region that stretched from the Loire River to the Pyrenees. Unlike most girls of her time, Eleanor received an exceptional education. Raised in the court of Poitiers, she was taught Latin, classical literature, music, philosophy, and law. The court she grew up in championed the ideals of chivalry and romantic love, a legacy she would later shape and spread across Europe. Heiress of Aquitaine. When Eleanor's father died suddenly in 1137 during a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, she inherited the Duchy of Aquitaine at the age of just 15. Her inheritance instantly made her the most sought-after bride in Christendom. That same year, she married Louis, heir to the French throne. Shortly thereafter, King Louis VI died, and Eleanor became Queen of France. But Eleanor was not content to be a mere ornament in the French court. Clash of wills. Louis VII, her husband, was deeply pious and reserved. In contrast, Eleanor was intelligent, lively, and politically astute. Their differences created tension. She brought a bold spirit to Paris that clashed with the austere traditions of the royal court. Despite their growing disconnection, she bore him 2 daughters and accompanied him on the Second Crusade in 1147. The Crusader. Queen Eleanor's participation in the Second Crusade shocked Europe. She brought with her hundreds of knights and personally led a group of armored noblewomen. Her presence, charisma, and leadership challenged gender norms. On the arduous journey through Anatolia, the French armies suffered terrible losses. In Antioch, Eleanor's closeness to her uncle Raymond sparked rumors of an affair. Louis, jealous and infuriated, forced her to leave Antioch. Their marriage, already frayed, fractured completely. Breaking the crown upon returning to France, Eleanor sought an annulment, citing consanguinity. The church granted it in 1152. Within 8 weeks, Eleanor shocked the continent again by marrying Henry, Duke of Anjou, 11 years her junior. Henry was ambitious and politically shrewd. Their union merged Aquitaine with the English crown, creating a powerful Anglo-French empire. 2 years later, Henry became King Henry II of England, and Eleanor was once again a queen. The Angevin Empire's Queen of England, Eleanor gave birth to 5 sons and 3 daughters. She played a crucial role in ruling the empire, acting as regent and counselor. Her court in Poitiers flourished as a center of culture and chivalry. The ideals of courtly love took root under her patronage. She arranged royal marriages, advised on foreign policy, and wielded real power. The Queen's revolt. Henry II, while brilliant, was increasingly authoritarian. His infidelity and domineering rule strained their marriage. By the 1170s, tensions erupted. Eleanor supported her sons in a revolt against their father. When the rebellion failed, Henry had her imprisoned for over 15 years. Despite her captivity, she remained influential, communicating with allies and managing her estates. Return to power. Henry's death in 1189 marked Eleanor's return to public life. Her son Richard the Lionheart ascended the throne and released her. She served as his advisor and regent while he was on crusade. Even into her 70s, Eleanor remained politically active. She traveled across Europe to arrange alliances and manage the kingdom. After Richard's death, she supported her youngest son, John, securing his position as king. The final years. Eleanor retired to the Abbey of Fontevraud in her later years, yet she continued to be involved in political matters. Her legacy was firmly established. She had been a queen of 2 nations, a mother to kings and queens, and a patron of the arts. Her life defied medieval expectations and reshaped the political landscape of Europe. The enduring legacy. Eleanor of Aquitaine died in 1204 at the age of 82. Her legacy lives on in the histories of France and England. She was a queen, a crusader, a mother, and a political force. Her influence extended through generations, affecting the destinies of empires. Eleanor's story is one of resilience, intelligence, and courage, a testament to a woman who ruled in an age when few dared to lead. The seeds of chivalry, long before Eleanor's influence blossomed in full. The seeds of her courtly ideals were already taking root. The court at Poitiers was unlike any other in Europe. It buzzed with troubadours, scholars, and knights who celebrated honor, bravery, and romantic love. Eleanor embraced these cultural traditions and gave them form and direction. Under her guidance, the concept of courtly love was refined into a cultural code. blending the chivalric duties of knights with poetic adoration. This ideal transformed medieval literature and influenced generations of writers and lovers. Eleanor, the Eleanor's patronage extended beyond romantic ideals. She funded abbeys, commissioned works of art, and supported the writings of poets and philosophers. In a time when women were often marginalized, Eleanor uplifted voices that echoed her vision of an enlightened court. The artistic flowering she inspired created a renaissance in the courts of southern France and northern England, inspiring admiration across Europe. Her court became a beacon for diplomacy and refinement, where political decisions were often wrapped in layers of symbolism, music, and performance. Mother of monarchs as a mother, Eleanor shaped not just the domestic life of her family, but the future of European politics. Her children would ascend thrones, forge alliances, and wage wars that defined an era. Richard the Lionheart, her favorite, was every inch the warrior king she had hoped to raise. John, though controversial, ruled England during a transformative period that eventually gave birth to the Magna Carta. Through strategic marriages, Eleanor connected her lineage to nearly every royal house in Europe, weaving a dynastic web that would influence medieval geopolitics for centuries. Birth of a legacy. In the year 1122, Eleanor of Aquitaine was born into one of the most powerful noble families in Europe. Her father, William X, Duke of Aquitaine, ruled over a vast and culturally rich region that stretched from the Loire River to the Pyrenees. Unlike most girls of her time, Eleanor received an exceptional education. Raised in the court of Poitiers, she was taught Latin, classical literature, music, philosophy, and law. The court she grew up in championed the ideals of chivalry and romantic love, a legacy she would later shape and spread across Europe. Heiress of Aquitaine. When Eleanor's father died suddenly in 1137, during a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, she inherited the Duchy of Aquitaine at the age of just 15. Her inheritance instantly made her the most sought-after bride in Christendom. That same year, she married Louis, heir to the French throne. Shortly thereafter, King Louis VI died, and Eleanor became Queen of France. But Eleanor was not content to be a mere ornament in the French court. Clash of wills. Louis VII, her husband, was deeply pious and reserved. In contrast, Eleanor was intelligent, lively, and politically astute. Their differences created tension. She brought a bold spirit to Paris that clashed with the austere traditions of the royal court. Despite their growing disconnection, she bore him 2 daughters and accompanied him on the Second Crusade in 1147. Chapter 4. The Crusader. Queen Eleanor's participation in the Second Crusade shocked Europe. She brought with her hundreds of knights, and personally led a group of armored noblewomen. Her presence, charisma, and leadership challenged gender norms. On the arduous journey through Anatolia, the French armies suffered terrible losses. In Antioch, Eleanor's closeness to her uncle Raymond sparked rumors of an affair. Louis, jealous and infuriated, forced her to leave Antioch. Their marriage, already fractured completely. Breaking the crown upon returning to France, Eleanor sought an annulment. Citing consanguinity, the church granted it in 1152. Within 8 weeks, Eleanor shocked the continent again by marrying Henry, Duke of Anjou, 11 years her junior. Henry was ambitious and politically shrewd. Their union merged Aquitaine with the English crown, creating a powerful Anglo-French empire. 2 years later, Henry became King Henry II of England, and Eleanor was once again a queen. The Angevin Empire. As Queen of England, Eleanor gave birth to 5 sons and 3 daughters. She played a crucial role in ruling the empire, acting as regent and counselor. Her court in Poitiers flourished as a center of culture and chivalry. The ideals of courtly love took root under her patronage. She arranged royal marriages, advised on foreign policy, and wielded real power. Chapter 7. The Queen's Revolt. Henry II, while brilliant, was increasingly authoritarian. His infidelity and domineering rule strained their marriage. By the 1170s, tensions erupted. Eleanor supported her sons in a revolt against their father. When the rebellion failed, Henry had her imprisoned for over 15 years. Despite her captivity, she remained influential, communicating with allies and managing her estates. Returned to power. Henry's death in 1189 marked Eleanor's return to public life. Her son, Richard the Lionheart, ascended the throne and released her. She served as his advisor and regent while he was on crusade. Even into her 70s, Eleanor remained politically active. She traveled across Europe to arrange alliances and manage the kingdom. After Richard's death, she supported her youngest son, John, securing his position as king. The final years Eleanor retired to the Abbey of Fontevraud in her later years, yet she continued to be involved in political matters. Her legacy was firmly established. She had been a queen of two nations, a mother to kings and queens, and a patron of the arts. Her life defied medieval expectations and reshaped the political landscape of Europe. The enduring legacy. Eleanor of Aquitaine died in 1204. At the age of 82, her legacy lives on in the histories of France and England. She was a queen, a crusader, a mother, and a political force. Her influence extended through generations, affecting the destinies of empires. Eleanor's story is one of resilience, intelligence, and courage, a testament to a woman who ruled in an age when few dared to lead. The seeds of chivalry. Long before Eleanor's influence blossomed in full, the seeds of her courtly ideals were already taking root. The court at Poitiers was unlike any other in Europe. It buzzed with troubadours, scholars, and knights who celebrated honor, bravery, and romantic love. Eleanor embraced these cultural traditions and gave them form and direction. Under her guidance, the concept of courtly love was refined into a cultural code, blending the chivalric duties of knights with poetic adoration. This ideal transformed medieval literature and influenced generations of writers and lovers. Eleanor the patron. Eleanor's patronage extended beyond romantic ideals. She funded abbeys, commissioned works of art, and supported the writings of poets and philosophers. In a time when women were often marginalized, Eleanor uplifted voices that echoed her vision of an enlightened court. The artistic flowering she inspired created a renaissance in the courts of southern France and northern England, inspiring admiration across Europe. Her court became a beacon for diplomacy and refinement, where political decisions were often wrapped in layers of symbolism, music, and performance. Mother of monarchs. As a mother, Eleanor shaped not just the domestic life of her family, but the future of European politics. Her children would ascend thrones, forge alliances, and wage wars that defined an era. Richard the Lionheart, her favorite, was every inch the warrior king she had hoped to raise. John, though controversial, ruled England during a transformative period that eventually gave birth to the Magna Carta. Through strategic marriages, Eleanor connected her lineage to nearly every royal house in Europe, weaving a dynastic web that would influence medieval geopolitics for centuries. Eleanor's influence on women's roles. Eleanor of Aquitaine redefined what it meant to be a woman of influence in a patriarchal society. At a time when women were expected to be silent consorts, Eleanor asserted her voice in matters of war, succession, diplomacy, and culture. Her presence on the Second Crusade, her governance of vast territories, and her role in court politics served as a model of female agency. Later, queens and noblewomen looked to her life as a blueprint for wielding power. Eleanor proved that intellect and determination could challenge societal norms. Even in the rigid structures of medieval Europe, a network of alliances beyond her immediate children, Eleanor's political acumen extended into forming an intricate web of European alliances. She orchestrated marriages between her children and influential noble houses across Castile, Sicily, Saxony, and Flanders. These unions not only fortified England's political standing, but also intertwined the destinies of multiple dynasties. Eleanor understood the power of family as a diplomatic tool and used it to weave a network that made the Angevin presence felt across the continent. Eleanor and the Church. Though deeply religious, Eleanor had a complex relationship with the Church. Her annulment from Louis VII was both a personal liberation and a political statement, challenging the moral authority of the clerical establishment. Later, her patronage extended to religious institutions like Fontevraud Abbey, which she supported financially and spiritually. Her commitment to religious foundations was not merely pious but strategic, ensuring her legacy was preserved through monastic chroniclers and sacred architecture. She navigated ecclesiastical power just as deftly as royal courts. Fontevraud. And final reflections. Eleanor's final years at Fontevraud Abbey were not those of quiet seclusion, but active reflection. The abbey, which housed tombs of her family, became her sanctuary and political base. Here, she managed correspondence, advised John from afar, and influenced monastic reforms. Her choice to be buried beside both Henry II and her son Richard was symbolic, a declaration of the roles they played in her epic life. Even in death, Eleanor curated her narrative, securing her place in the dynastic heart of England and France. The chronicler's portraits Eleanor's legacy lives not only in politics and culture, but in the pages of medieval chronicles. Writers such as William of Newburgh and Roger of Hoveden, though often shaped by the biases of their age, captured her charisma, intelligence, and complexity. In poetry and prose, Eleanor became a symbol of powerful femininity. Later historians would debate her motivations, some romanticizing her, others criticizing her assertiveness. Yet across all portrayals, one constant remains. Eleanor was a woman who left an indelible mark. Eleanor, in modern memory in modern times, Eleanor has been rediscovered through literature, drama, and film. From historical novels to stage plays and documentaries, she captivates audiences as a timeless figure of strength and sophistication. Feminist scholars regard her as a pioneer who shattered medieval constraints. Museums curate exhibitions around her artifacts. Genealogists trace lineage to her royal blood. Her story resonates not because it is easy, but because it is extraordinary. Eleanor's memory endures as a testament to a life lived with vision and resolve. The fragmenting empire as Eleanor approached her final years. The once formidable Angevin Empire she helped build was beginning to fracture. Her son Richard I had managed to hold the kingdom together during his brief but storied reign, yet his absence during the Crusades left governance in flux. After Richard's death, John inherited a fragile legacy, though Eleanor worked tirelessly to support his ascension. The internal dissent and external pressures from France, led by Philip II, began to erode the empire. Eleanor had spent her life constructing bridges of power. Now she watched the foundations tremble. The power of image. One of Eleanor's most underrated achievements was her mastery of image and narrative. She knew how to use symbols, ceremonies, and public appearances to shape perception. Her presence at royal events, the carefully curated atmosphere of her court, and her commissioning of troubadours to sing tales of noble love and valor served more than entertainment. These were tools of influence. In an age when reputation could determine loyalty and success, Eleanor made sure her image was one of grace, wisdom, and commanding dignity. Eleanor and cultural synthesis. Eleanor's court was not a closed circle but a cultural crossroads. Through her exposure to diverse traditions during the Crusades and her travels across Europe, she absorbed and integrated artistic styles, musical motifs, and philosophical ideas. This synthesis of East and West, Christian and classical, noble and clerical, shaped her unique brand of governance. She promoted tolerance and dialogue, particularly in an age marked by religious dogma and territorial strife. Her inclusive vision influenced everything from court poetry to legal custom. Eleanor and succession crisis. The challenges Eleanor faced in securing her children's inheritance were immense. Feudal allegiances were fickle, rival claims abounded, and the ambitions of foreign powers threatened stability. After Richard's death, the threat posed by Arthur of Brittany, the son of her late son Geoffrey, cast a shadow over John's rule. Eleanor, despite her age, rode across Aquitaine and into the heart of France to rally support for her youngest son. It was a last political campaign for a woman who had spent her life fighting for her family's future. Her efforts delayed, though did not ultimately prevent, the loss of much of the Angevin territory. A timeless sovereign. Eleanor's ability to remain relevant across decades of political upheaval is perhaps her greatest legacy. Few figures in history, let alone women of the 12th century, survived and thrived across the reigns of two kings. The collapse of one marriage, a rebellion, imprisonment, and the transitions of empire. Her adaptability, wit, and unmatched political instinct kept her at the center of European power for more than 60 years. She lived not just in history but in myth, shaping the story of the Middle Ages from within. Lessons in diplomacy. Eleanor's strategic prowess in diplomacy was unmatched. In her era, she cultivated relationships across linguistic and cultural barriers, often acting as intermediary in conflicts that could have erupted into wars. Her fluency in multiple dialects, coupled with her understanding of court etiquette and power dynamics, allowed her to navigate and even manipulate the fragile alliances of feudal Europe. She was especially skilled in using marriages and treaties to secure peace or gain advantage without direct confrontation. Her actions not only preserved her family's status but also shaped the balance of power for generations. Eleanor's literary legacy. Through her influence on court culture, Eleanor became a central figure in the flowering of medieval literature. She championed poets like Bernard de Ventador and inspired generations of troubadours who romanticized themes of unattainable love and noble suffering. Her court popularized the concept of the idealized lady, a poetic muse who challenged knights to noble deeds. This literary tradition would evolve into a cornerstone of Western literature, reflected centuries later in the works of Dante, Shakespeare, and beyond. Eleanor's legacy lives in ink as much as in stone. Eleanor, in contrast, compared to the women of her time and even those in later centuries, Eleanor stands as a striking anomaly. While many queens were remembered only as consorts or mothers, she was remembered as a ruler, a rebel, and a reformer. She exceeded expectations placed on her by patriarchal norms and forged her own political identity. She was not defined by the kings she married, but rather, she redefined them. Louis VII became remembered as the man who lost her, Henry II as the king whose greatest challenge came not from foes but from his queen. Gender, power, and myth. Eleanor's life challenges the assumptions of medieval womanhood. The myths surrounding her, whether of scandal, seduction, or sorcery, speak less to her actions than to the fears she provoked. A woman who wielded power publicly, advised kings, and led armies upset the conventional order. These narratives served to diminish her accomplishments, but ironically they also amplified her legend. In revisiting her story, historians peel away layers of myth to uncover a figure more fascinating, not a legend born of fantasy, but a leader shaped by intellect, will, and vision. Echoes in stone. The physical remnants of Eleanor's life remain scattered across Europe. The Abbey of Fontevraud, where she lies in effigy beside Henry II and Richard the Lionheart, stands as a serene monument to her enduring legacy. The chateaux of Aquitaine, the Gothic arches she commissioned, and the manuscripts borne in her courts are echoes in stone and script. These artifacts are not mere relics but historical testimony, proof that a woman in the 12th century could leave a mark as lasting as any king or crusader. The legacy through lineage. Eleanor's legacy did not end with her death, nor was it confined to the cultural renaissance she helped usher in. Her descendants would go on to wield considerable power throughout Europe, their bloodlines flowing through monarchies in England, France, Spain, and beyond. Her granddaughter, Blanche of Castile, became Queen of France and a powerful regent in her own right. Other descendants, like Edward I of England and Philip IV of France, inherited not only her blood but also her political cunning and vision. For statecraft, Eleanor's dynastic reach extended centuries beyond her own time. Eleanor and the Angevin declined, despite Eleanor's efforts to secure her family's prominence. The Angevin Empire eventually crumbled under the weight of internal strife and external pressures. John's reckless reign, including the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215, marked the empire's sharp decline. Yet even in this unraveling, Eleanor's earlier achievements cast a long shadow. The administrative systems, cultural institutions, and diplomatic frameworks she helped build remained influential. Her influence was present in the foundations of modern governance even as her empire fragmented. Rediscovering Eleanor centuries after her death, Eleanor's story began to resurface in historical scholarship and literature. In the 19th and 20th centuries, writers and historians re-evaluated her life, shedding the moralistic lens that had long obscured her legacy. Modern biographies emphasized her intellect, leadership, and cultural influence. She emerged not as a supporting character in the lives of kings, but as a protagonist in the epic of medieval Europe. Museums featured her likeness, universities studied her court, and storytellers reimagined her as a symbol of strength and autonomy. Eleanor and the feminist renaissance. With the rise of feminist historiography in the 20th century, Eleanor became a central figure in discussions about medieval womanhood and political agency. She represented a rare case of female authority in a patriarchal world. Feminist scholars highlighted her choices, her defiance, and her resilience. No longer a relic of medieval romance, Eleanor became an icon, one whose life illustrated the complexities and possibilities of womanhood in a rigid social order. Her rediscovery paralleled broader movements toward gender equality and historical inclusion. The enduring appeal. What makes Eleanor of Aquitaine endure in the public imagination is not just her role in history, but her rich contradiction. She was at once a crusader and a poet's muse, a prisoner and a queen, a romantic ideal and a ruthless strategist. She thrived in a world that sought to contain her, and in doing so, she changed that world. Each generation finds new meaning in her life, whether as a political genius, a cultural patron, or a feminist icon. Eleanor remains not just a figure of the past, but a mirror for the present. Eleanor and the Second Crusade, revisited. The Second Crusade marked a pivotal turning point in Eleanor's public life and personal evolution. Though largely viewed as a failed campaign from a military standpoint, it was on this long, arduous journey that Eleanor tested the boundaries of queenship and command. Leading a company of her own vassals, she crossed treacherous terrain, braved disease and dehydration, and encountered a world far removed from the courts of France and Aquitaine. Her defiance in Antioch, where she challenged her husband's authority and sought strategic influence through her Uncle Raymond, was not just personal rebellion, but a declaration of her political autonomy. This was a woman who saw herself as a co-sovereign, not merely a queen consort. Women of Eleanor's world. To understand Eleanor's rise, one must also examine the women who surrounded and preceded her. Figures like Empress of Henry I of England and claimant to the English throne helped to redefine female authority in the medieval period. Eleanor knew Matilda and likely drew inspiration from her tenacity and ambition. Likewise, noblewomen across Aquitaine and Languedoc held significant power in landholding and administration. Eleanor's strength didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was part of a broader tradition of women in southern France, who exercised influence in both secular and ecclesiastical spheres. Her life was both a product and an expansion of that precedent. Eleanor and the art of patronage. While kings often defined themselves through conquest, Eleanor shaped her legacy through culture. She curated one of the most refined and intellectually vibrant courts in medieval Europe. Her patronage extended to theologians, musicians, and poets. She wasn't just funding art, she was shaping a cultural identity. At a time when literacy was rare, especially for women, Eleanor's court became a haven for scholarship and creativity. The artistic flourishing of her domains helped unify the disparate elements of the Angevin Empire under a shared sense of nobility, virtue, and aesthetic sophistication. The political prisoner Lana's imprisonment by Henry II, following her support of her son's rebellion, was meant to sideline her. Yet even in confinement, Eleanor remained influential. Held under varying degrees of restriction for more than a decade, she communicated with allies, managed estates, and prepared for the political future she knew would one day return to her grasp. When she was finally released after Henry's death, she emerged not diminished but reinvigorated. At an age when most noblewomen retired to religious life, Eleanor re-entered the political stage, serving as regent, emissary, and queen mother. Queenship redefined. Eleanor didn't simply occupy the role of queen, she reshaped it. Before her, queens in France and England were often relegated to the background of governance. After Eleanor, the queen's court became a center of influence and diplomacy. She established a precedent for queens to act as regents, to engage in international relations, and to act as cultural stewards. Her descendants would follow her example, with queens like Blanche of Castile and Elizabeth I echoing Eleanor's model of queenship that combined intellect, authority, and patronage. Her reign helped transition queens from ceremonial figures to central actors in royal administration. Eleanor's political toolkit. Eleanor's longevity in political affairs was due in part to her versatile methods. She knew when to charm, when to command, and when to retreat only to return stronger. Her strategies included tactical marriages, calculated displays of piety, and leveraging cultural symbolism. She was equally comfortable negotiating with nobles in a royal hall as she was corresponding through scribes across contested borders. Eleanor's approach to diplomacy was holistic, blending emotion, persuasion, lineage, and law. Her reign illustrates a critical truth: soft power, when wielded wisely, can move empires. Eleanor's influence on medieval law. Though not a lawmaker in the modern sense, Eleanor's political actions influenced medieval legal culture. Her presence as a landholding duchess and acting regent forced courts to interpret and apply feudal law with greater nuance. She defended property rights, negotiated dowries and inheritance with rigor, and used charters to formalize her decisions. In doing so, she helped shape the evolution of customary law in Aquitaine and Angevin territories. Her experience demonstrated that legal authority could be wielded by a woman without undermining the law's credibility, something revolutionary for her time. The Plantagenet matriarch Lana was more than queen. She was the architect of the Plantagenet dynasty. Her political foresight secured the succession of her sons, despite internal rivalries and near constant war. Her influence endured even when monarchs faltered. She served as a spiritual and strategic center for her family, guiding her children's decisions and mediating disputes. After Richard's death, her support for John ensured the Plantagenets retained power in England. Without Eleanor's vision and mediation, the dynasty might have fractured permanently during its most vulnerable transitions. A life in letters. Much of what we know about Eleanor comes through chroniclers, but some of her own letters survive into her mind and mood. These documents reveal a woman of sharp intellect, deep sentiment, and unshakable command. In her letters, she arranged royal marriages, coordinated military movements, and offered counsel to her sons. She was not just reacting to events, she was shaping them. Her written word carried the weight of a sovereign, and her correspondence continues to influence our understanding of medieval statecraft. Eleanor's enduring mythos. Eleanor's life has inspired myths as rich as her history, from romanticized tales of courtly love to dramatizations of betrayal and rebellion. She has become a literary and historical archetype. In these portrayals, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes unjust, Eleanor serves as both muse and menace, saint and sinner. The persistence of these myths reflects her magnetic legacy. She occupies a unique space in Western imagination, a medieval queen whose story remains vivid, dynamic, and ever-evolving. The queen, as symbolized by the twilight of her life, Eleanor had evolved from a political actor into a cultural symbol. She came to represent the intersection of intellect and power, femininity and sovereignty. Her image appeared in stained glass, effigies, and manuscript illustrations, not always accurately, but always evocatively. The symbolic Queen Eleanor stood for lineage, legacy, and courtly grandeur. Her persona transcended the historical moment, taking root in the collective consciousness of Europe as an embodiment of noble authority. Eleanor and religious patronage. Eleanor's patronage extended deeply into the religious sphere, not merely as a sign of devotion, but as a calculated assertion of influence. She endowed abbeys, supported Cistercian foundations, and chose to spend her final years at the Abbey of Fontevraud. Her support for religious institutions often served dual purposes: acts of faith and tools of soft diplomacy. Fontevraud became both sanctuary and stronghold, a place where prayer and policy intertwined. Her burial there, alongside Henry II and Richard I, solidified it as a dynastic mausoleum. Eleanor's impact on female education. Eleanor's emphasis on learning was not limited to herself. She fostered an environment where education for noblewomen was valued. She ensured her daughters and granddaughters were literate, politically aware, and culturally fluent. This quietly revolutionary stance helped normalize the idea that noble women could be advisors and leaders, not merely wives and mothers. The effects rippled through the Plantagenet line, contributing to a broader trend of educated, empowered royal women throughout Europe. The rebellion reconsidered, the rebellion of Eleanor's sons against Henry II, an act that once painted her as a scheming traitor, has been reinterpreted by modern historians. Rather than an act of selfish defiance, it is now seen as a calculated move to safeguard the future of her children and the autonomy of Aquitaine. Her role in the uprising underscores her long-term vision, a restructuring of power that allowed for greater regional sovereignty and reduced Henry's increasingly autocratic rule. Her imprisonment was a political price she was willing to pay to secure a different future. Eleanor, in comparative legacy, when compared with her contemporaries and successors, Eleanor's influence stands unparalleled. Few queens wielded such sustained power across multiple kingdoms and eras, while Empress Matilda laid the groundwork for female succession, and later figures like Isabella of Castile consolidated national power. Eleanor's legacy was both broader and more foundational. She was not merely part of the story, she shaped the map upon which the rest of Europe's monarchs would draw their lines. A queen for the ages, Eleanor of Aquitaine remains one of the most compelling figures in medieval history. Her life defied the expectations of gender, age, and political convention. From duchess to queen, crusader to prisoner, regent to matriarch, she embodied every role with intellect, grace, and determination. Her legacy is not confined to royal bloodlines or historical footnotes. It lives on in the ideals of leadership, resilience, and cultural patronage. She was not only ahead of her time, she helped shape the times that followed. Eleanor, in visual art, the visual representation of Eleanor has evolved over the centuries, reflecting shifting values and historical interpretations. Medieval illustrations depicted her with modest elegance, usually alongside her sons or in religious contexts. Renaissance and Victorian artists, drawn to her mystique, reimagined her as a romantic heroine cloaked in regal drapery, clutching scrolls or swords. In stained glass, sculpture, and painting, her image came to symbolize enduring strength and refined authority. Each generation has reinterpreted her face, but the themes of grace and determination remain. The Abbey of Fontevraud legacy in stone. Fontevraud Abbey stands not only as Eleanor's final resting place, but as a living testament to her vision. This dual monastery, which housed both monks and nuns, was progressive for its time and embodied Eleanor's belief in balance between male and female, secular and sacred. The abbey's grandeur, its long corridors, and Gothic vaults echo with her memory. Pilgrims and historians alike visit to stand before her effigy, hands clasped over a book, eyes lifted in calm authority. It is not just a tomb, it's a throne of legacy. Eleanor's echo in literature. Writers have long been enchanted by Eleanor's layered persona. In modern novels, plays, and historical fiction, she appears as a cunning strategist, a romantic ideal, a mother torn by loyalty, and a sovereign out of time. Jean Anwells Beckett and James Goldman's The Lion in Winter reshaped her in popular culture. Assertive, witty, and emotionally complex. These fictionalized portrayals have helped reintroduce Eleanor to new audiences, reminding us that her story still holds relevance, depth, and dramatic intrigue. Eleanor and the ideals of chivalry. The court of Eleanor was the cradle of what would become the chivalric code. Though romanticized over time, its core ideas, honor, loyalty, respect for women, originated in the values she and her poets nurtured. By sponsoring troubadours and elevating the theme of courtly love, Eleanor helped inject moral and emotional nuance into the warrior ethos of the medieval knight. Her influence gave rise to a softer, more ethical vision of knighthood, one that balanced courage with compassion, a legacy carved in time. As historians continue to reassess medieval Europe, Eleanor's prominence only grows. Her life remains a blueprint for power wielded with intellect and heart. Whether through her children, her courts, or her cultural impact, Eleanor's reach extended far beyond her years. She was a creator of kingdoms, a cultivator of minds, and a keeper of memory. Her story reminds us that history is not just shaped by battles and treaties, but by visionaries who dared to defy convention and leave their mark on time itself. Queenship and legacy. In contrast, Eleanor's model of queenship stood in stark contrast to many of her contemporaries and successors. While queens like Adeliza of Louving or Berengaria of Navarre often remained in the shadows of their husbands' reigns, Eleanor commanded visibility and autonomy. Her willingness to participate in diplomacy, governance, and war created a new benchmark. Later queens, such as Margaret of Anjou and Elizabeth I, would follow elements of this precedent, asserting female authority in patriarchal systems. Even if they faced opposition, Eleanor's reign wasn't just exceptional, it was transformational. Eleanor's influence on Romance traditions. The stories of courtly love that blossomed during Eleanor's time were not mere fictions, but reflections of ideals her court popularized. Poets like Chrétien de Troyes, who crafted the early tales of Lancelot and Camelot, were influenced by the intellectual climate Eleanor helped foster. Her court in Poitiers served as a workshop of romantic morality, a place where love was elevated from physical desire to spiritual elevation, and where women were portrayed as wise arbiters of virtue. These ideals would shape Western romantic tradition for centuries. Eleanor and the code of reputational Norse life was a constant negotiation between action and perception. She understood the importance of reputation in feudal society and crafted her own with intention. This extended from the clothing she wore to the alliances she forged and the causes she championed. Her reputation became a form of currency, wielded as effectively as armies or gold. Even in disgrace or imprisonment, she was never forgotten nor truly discredited. The narrative she shaped ensured that she remained a formidable figure in any political calculation. A mother and her monarchs. As the mother of 10 children, Eleanor's legacy was intimately tied to their fates. She guided Richard the Lion with fierce loyalty, defended John against rebellious nobles, and even supported her daughter's ascensions across Europe. Her correspondence reveals both warmth and sternness. She was not sentimental, but strategic. She viewed her children, not just as heirs, but as instruments of her broader political vision. Her ability to balance maternal care with political foresight solidified her influence across generations. The myth and the woman in the end. The greatest achievement of Eleanor of Aquitaine may be how successfully she turned herself into legend. A living myth in her own time, she navigated scandal, rebellion, loss, and triumph with extraordinary resilience. And yet, behind the myth stood a real woman, brilliant, flawed, loving, shrewd. Her myth endures because it is rooted in substance. Eleanor did not simply witness history, she forged it. And in doing so, she gifted future generations a symbol of what leadership, femininity, and humanity could mean when bound by no limits. Eleanor's use of soft power, long before the term soft power entered the modern political lexicon. Eleanor practiced it with masterful precision. Her ability to influence events without direct force through marriage alliances, cultural patronage, religious endowments, and courtly diplomacy demonstrates her sophisticated understanding of power's subtler forms. While kings drew swords, Eleanor wrote letters, hosted councils, and shaped ideologies. Her soft power proved durable, echoing through generations and establishing enduring political and cultural frameworks. Eleanor and the Mediterranean world. Though a figure rooted in the courts of France and England, Eleanor's reach extended across the Mediterranean. Her time in Antioch during the Second Crusade exposed her to Byzantine Arab and Eastern Christian cultures. These experiences broadened her worldview and influenced her tastes in art, architecture, and political negotiation. She stood at a rare crossroads of East and West, where language, faith, and empire collided. This exposure gave Eleanor a cosmopolitan edge that distinguished her from her more insular contemporaries. A patron of music and performance, the troubadour tradition flourished under Eleanor's watchful eye. As a patron of music, she elevated the role of poetic performance in noble courts, helping to preserve oral storytelling traditions through lyric and song. These performances were not mere entertainment, they carried moral, romantic, and political messages that echoed Eleanor's courtly values. Through her encouragement of performers, she helped institutionalize the bardic voice as a respected channel of cultural memory. Eleanor's correspondence as political weapon. Letters reveal a skilled rhetorician. Her language was precise, persuasive, and tailored to its audience, whether appealing to papal authority, guiding her sons, or negotiating with foreign powers. These documents were not only practical tools, but also reflections of her ability to engage with complex legal, spiritual, and philosophical questions. In a world where written communication was rare and revered, Eleanor's mastery of the epistolary form enhanced her authority far beyond her immediate surroundings. Conclusion. A life of unbroken influence. Eleanor's death in 1204 marked the end of an era, but not the end of her influence. Her legacy lived on in the laws, customs, and lineages she helped shape. Her story stands as a reminder that power comes in many forms: literary, intellectual, cultural, maternal, and that greatness is often born not from conformity, but from courageous disruption. Few figures in history match the depth, duration, and diversity of Eleanor's impact. She remains not only a woman of her time, but a woman for all time. Eleanor's relationship with the Church. Throughout her life, Eleanor maintained a complex and evolving relationship with the Church. On one hand, she generously endowed religious institutions, funded monastic communities, and supported ecclesiastical reforms. On the other, she was at times criticized for defying traditional gender roles and pursuing power in ways that challenged ecclesiastical norms. Her participation in the Second Crusade, her annulment from Louis VII, and her assertive political role all sparked tensions with clerical authorities. Yet Eleanor skillfully navigated these contradictions, leveraging the Church's structures when useful, while maintaining her autonomy. Eleanor and the birth of English identity. Eleanor's influence on the formation of early English identity is often overlooked but significant. By uniting her vast territories in Aquitaine with the English crown through her marriage to Henry II, she laid the groundwork for an Anglo-French cultural synthesis. Her children, especially Richard and John, embodied this dual heritage. The courtly traditions she imported helped shape the emerging chivalric and literary codes that would become foundational to English aristocratic identity in the Middle Ages. Her cultural influence stretched beyond borders, blending regional customs into a new national consciousness. Eleanor, in comparative monarchy, when assessed alongside other European monarchs, Eleanor's longevity and breadth of influence are extraordinary. Unlike rulers whose power was bound to specific thrones, Eleanor navigated multiple courts, cultures, and systems of governance. Her ability to thrive in the distinct political landscapes of France and England, and to exert influence across the Holy Roman Empire and Iberian Peninsula through her children, placed her at the heart of European diplomacy. She was not simply a sovereign, she was a sovereign maker, shaping dynasties and stabilizing empires. The power of narrative control. Eleanor's story is a case study in the power of narrative control. She lived in an era dominated by male chroniclers, yet managed to leave behind a legacy that resisted erasure or vilification. Through patronage, performance, and strategic alliances, Eleanor actively shaped the way her story would be told. Even when portrayed as dangerous or controversial, she remained central, never invisible. Her success in maintaining a voice within the historical record is a rare triumph in a time when most powerful women were either sidelined or demonized. Eleanor's place in feminist historiography. Modern feminist historians have re-examined Eleanor not only as a political figure, but as a symbol of agency in a restrictive world. Her life has inspired countless scholarly articles, biographies, and academic debates about gender, power, and representation. She is often cited as one of the first female rulers to wield state power effectively while maintaining her individuality. In this light, Eleanor becomes not just a medieval icon, but a lens through which we understand the shifting roles of women in historical narrative and modern memory. Eleanor and the art of matrimony. Marriage, in Eleanor's era, was not a personal matter, it was a strategic alliance. Eleanor's marriages were deeply political, and she mastered the art of turning these unions into tools of diplomacy. Her first marriage to Louis VII may have failed personally, but it demonstrated her early understanding of dynastic politics. Her second marriage to Henry II proved transformational, creating a sprawling Anglo-French empire. Through her children, she orchestrated additional marriages across Europe, using matrimony to stabilize borders, win loyalty, and extend influence. Her personal empire forged not only in war, but in wedding vows. Eleanor and the question of loyalty. Eleanor's life was marked by shifting loyalties between kingdoms, between family members, and between ideologies. Her ability to navigate this instability without losing her agency or influence is a testament to her political acumen. She remained loyal to her vision of a balanced, autonomous Aquitaine, even as alliances shifted around her. Her support for her sons in their rebellion against Henry II has been read as betrayal, but it can also be seen as loyalty to a higher purpose, ensuring fair succession and preserving the region she ruled since youth. A cultural bridge across eras. Few figures straddled eras the way Eleanor did. Born into the final decades of the High Middle Ages, she lived into the early rise of centralized monarchies and increasing clerical power. She embraced the traditions of her native Aquitaine while adapting to the evolving courts of England and France. Her influence connected the lyrical world of troubadours to the legalistic age of Magna Carta. She was a living bridge between oral tradition and written charter, between feudal fragmentation and royal consolidation. Eleanor's final years revisited. In her final years at Fontevraud Abbey, Eleanor was anything but passive. Though age and illness slowed her, she remained involved in politics until the very end, supervising the transition of power, advising her children, and securing the future of the Plantagenet dynasty. Her burial at Fontevraud, alongside Henry II and Richard I, is symbolic not only of family unity but also of dynastic permanence. The queen who had traveled the world, fought through exile and imprisonment, and shaped a continent chose, in the end, a quiet sanctuary, but one fit for royalty. Eleanor's relevance today. Eleanor of Aquitaine's relevance has not faded. She is a staple in university curricula, a frequent subject of historical fiction, and an icon in discussions about gender and leadership. Her story resonates because it challenges the idea that history is made only by kings and conquerors. Eleanor made history not just through war, but through intellect, diplomacy, cultural sponsorship, and maternal strategy. In an age still grappling with female power and representation, Eleanor offers a model of complexity, courage, and legacy. Eleanor's network of influence. Behind Eleanor's overt political actions lay a robust and carefully cultivated network. She maintained long-standing relationships with influential bishops, barons, clerics, and poets. These connections allowed her to gather intelligence, build alliances, and exercise indirect control over distant territories. Her rapport with cultural and religious figures ensured that her name was preserved, not only in legal documents, but in chronicles, songs, and scripture. This multidimensional network made her more than a ruler, it made her indispensable. The legacy of her daughters. Though much attention is given to Eleanor's sons, her daughters were equally important instruments of diplomacy and continuity. Marie of France, her daughter with Louis VII, became Countess of Champagne and a notable patron of literature. Eleanor of England married Alfonso VIII of Castile, extending Eleanor's influence into Iberian politics. Joan, Queen of Sicily, and Matilda, Duchess of Saxony, also played key roles in expanding and maintaining familial alliances. Through her daughters, Eleanor left fingerprints on courts from the English Channel to the Mediterranean. Lessons in adaptability. If one trait defined Eleanor's political survival, it was adaptability. From a Duchess in Aquitaine to Queen of France, then Queen of England, and finally Dowager and Regent Eleanor constantly reshaped herself to meet evolving challenges. She endured losses, betrayals, and political exile, yet continually re-entered the fray stronger. Her ability to adjust to new roles, environments, and expectations without compromising her authority marks her as one of the most versatile figures in royal history. Eleanor and the visual legacy of power beyond written records. Eleanor left behind a powerful visual legacy. Her effigy at Fontevraud Abbey is among the most iconic medieval funerary sculptures, not in mourning, but reclining calmly with a book in hand. This image was revolutionary. Rather than depicting death or submission, it conveyed sovereignty, wisdom, and peace. It set a new standard for how powerful women could be remembered, in strength rather than sorrow. Continuing this of Aquitaine's story is far from over. Each generation reinterprets her through its own lens, feminist, nationalistic, romantic, or political. Her presence in contemporary literature, academic study, and media ensures that she remains not a relic of the past, but a figure who challenges the present. As long as questions of power, gender, ambition, and legacy endure, Eleanor's life will remain a source of insight and inspiration. She is, and always will be, a queen whose crown was forged by her own hand. Eleanor's relationship with her grandchildren. Though the historical record is sparse, it is clear that Eleanor played a formative role in shaping the next generation of European rulers. Her grandchildren included Blanche of Castile, who became Queen of France and mother to Saint Louis IX. Blanche inherited Eleanor's political sensibility and religious piety, wielding significant influence during her son's reign. Eleanor's values, particularly around diplomacy and cultural patronage, were clearly passed on through her descendants, reinforcing the legacy she began to cultivate decades before. Eleanor's presence in French and English memory. Both England and France claim Eleanor, though through different lenses. In English memory, she is often revered as the mother of Richard the Lionheart and as a wise queen who held court with poetic grandeur. In French historical consciousness, she is a Duchess of Aquitaine who defied Parisian court etiquette and challenged royal authority. Her dual identity offers insight into the nuances of medieval nationalism. She remains a contested and celebrated figure, reflecting the shared yet separate histories of the two kingdoms. Eleanor's reinterpretation in modern media, film and television have played a major role in introducing Eleanor to modern audiences. From Katharine Hepburn's fierce portrayal in The Lion in Winter to documentaries and historical dramas, she is often depicted as simultaneously wise, manipulative, loving, and wounded. These portrayals emphasize her contradictions, inviting viewers to see her as a multifaceted woman rather than a static archetype. Modern media has helped reposition her not as an accessory to male rulers, but as a protagonist in her own right. Eleanor and the ethics of rule. Throughout her reign, Eleanor demonstrated an evolving ethical framework that balanced pragmatism with principle. She understood the necessity of alliances, the burden of war, and the fragile nature of peace. While she made difficult decisions, some seen as betrayals, others as bold defiance, her actions were guided by a vision of governance that sought balance, justice, and stability. Her rule raises timeless questions about the morality of leadership and the limits of power in a world shaped by ambition. Her letters, a queen's inner voice. Eleanor's surviving letters, though few, offer rare glimpses into her intellect and inner life. They reveal her as firm, persuasive, and emotionally complex. She wrote with precision and purpose, whether instructing her children, negotiating with church officials, or managing estates. These documents demonstrate not only her political acumen but her emotional intelligence. Her voice, clear, commanding, and occasionally poignant, reminds us that beneath the crown was a keen and feeling mind. Eleanor and the architecture of influence beyond policy and politics. Eleanor's legacy can be traced through physical structures, the abbeys, castles, and courts she supported or helped shape. Fontevraud Abbey stands as the most enduring of these spaces, but other sites across Aquitaine and England bear her imprint. These spaces served as hubs of administration and art, where her ideals of justice, refinement, and order were enacted in stone. Architecture was another form of messaging, and Eleanor knew how to make her vision visible. A dynasty shaped by her hand, the Plantagenet dynasty, one of the most influential royal houses in European history, owes much of its coherence to Eleanor. She was not merely a mother to kings but an architect of succession. Her strategic foresight ensured a continuity of rule that extended long after her death. While her sons frequently warred, Eleanor worked behind the scenes to preserve the core of their inheritance. Without her mediation, the dynasty might have fractured irreparably. A legacy still unfolding as scholars, artists, and leaders continue to draw inspiration from Eleanor's life. Her legacy remains dynamic. Each new biography, exhibit, or interpretation adds nuance to our understanding of her. Far from being a static historical figure, Eleanor of Aquitaine remains a prism through which we can view questions of gender, authority, culture, and resilience. Her life, so improbable, so ambitious, so enduring, is a reminder that true legacy is not bound by the age one lives in, but by the generations one inspires. Eleanor's influence on medieval jurisprudence, though not a lawmaker in the formal sense, Eleanor's impact on the legal culture of her time cannot be underestimated. Her rule in Aquitaine was marked by a deep respect for local customs and feudal contracts, which she upheld even when politically inconvenient. Her influence extended into English governance, where her emphasis on feudal responsibility and justice was echoed in court proceedings and charters. Eleanor did not codify laws, but she reinforced legal norms through her patronage, her example, and her insistence on fairness in feudal obligation. Her economic vision. Eleanor presided over one of the most prosperous regions in medieval Europe. Aquitaine, rich in wine, salt, and trade, thrived under her guidance. She encouraged fair taxation, trade routes, and stability to ensure commercial growth. Her stewardship laid the groundwork for a sustainable economy that benefited not only nobles but merchants, clergy, and peasantry alike. This focus on local prosperity strengthened loyalty and gave Eleanor an economic advantage in her negotiations with monarchs and barons. Diplomacy through faith. In a deeply religious age, Eleanor understood the political utility of faith. While she maintained a personal piety, she also knew how to engage bishops, abbots, and even the papacy to her advantage. She sponsored abbeys and supported religious orders, not only for salvation, but for strategic influence. Her time at Fontevraud was spent as both benefactor and political operator, using religion as a stabilizing and legitimizing force for her family and her realm. Eleanor and the rise of female patronage. Eleanor's example sparked a rise in female patronage across Europe. Queens, countesses, and abbesses began commissioning works of art, architecture, and literature in increasing numbers. Eleanor's cultural reach inspired women of noble birth to wield influence through sponsorship of chapels, schools, and manuscripts. She demonstrated that cultural capital could be just as potent as military might, and that a queen could shape history not only with swords but with stories, songs, and stone. Preparing for the endeavour in her final years, Eleanor remained deliberate. Her retreat to Fontevraud was not an abdication, but a strategic pivot. There, she finalized land grants, mentored her granddaughter Blanche of Castile, and arranged alliances that would outlive her. She focused on preservation of her family's power, of her duchy's rights, and of her spiritual readiness. Eleanor's end was not one of fading light, but of careful curation, a final chapter written with clarity, dignity, and foresight. Cultural fusion in Eleanor's court became a crucible of cultural fusion. There Latin scholasticism met Arabic science and Provençal poetry. Her travels and experiences across Europe and the Mediterranean allowed her to bring diverse influences together, shaping a court that valued both tradition and innovation. Musicians, translators, artists, and theologians gathered under her patronage, creating a legacy of multicultural engagement rare for its time. This cultural richness played a vital role in sparking intellectual trends that would ripple into the Renaissance. The strategic widow. After the death of Henry II, Eleanor assumed the full power and independence of widowhood, an often overlooked period of opportunity for medieval noblewomen. No longer tethered to a king, she acted as Queen Dowager with significant autonomy. She coordinated diplomacy with Castile, maintained peace in Aquitaine, and monitored political threats to her lineage. Rather than retreating from public life, Eleanor used widowhood as a platform to solidify her dynasty's strength. Women in Eleanor's influence extended to a network of strong women in her circle, abbesses, daughters, and noble allies. She cultivated a female environment in which intellect and loyalty were prized. These women, often overlooked in broader histories, were critical to the daily operations of courts and communication channels. Their collective agency, enabled by Eleanor's leadership, broadened the scope of acceptable female influence in noble society. Eleanor's psychological portrait. Eleanor's political success is often discussed, but her emotional and psychological endurance is equally noteworthy. Betrayed by family, imprisoned for rebellion, and tested by the deaths of beloved children, she remained resilient. Her writings and reported actions suggest a personality shaped by keen observation, restrained emotion, and tactical foresight. Though passionate in belief, she rarely acted impulsively, a queen who blended resolve with emotional discipline in ways that modern psychology might equate with high executive functioning. The final legacy. By the time of her death, in 1204, Eleanor of Aquitaine had transformed the idea of queenship. She redefined the role of women in governance, reshaped European alliances, and left behind not just descendants, but institutions and cultural ideals. Her life spanned the fall of the Crusader kingdoms and the rise of English common law. She was a participant in history's making, a custodian of culture, and a symbol of enduring power. Her tomb may rest in silence, but her voice echoes still in courts, chronicles, classrooms, and the collective imagination. Eleanor and the Code of Courtly Conduct. The concept of courtly behavior, refined manners, loyalty, valor, and romantic idealism was largely shaped and spread through the courts. Influenced by Eleanor, she helped establish a system of conduct that governed not only social interactions but political and romantic alliances. Her sponsorship of troubadours and poets didn't merely create a literary fad, it crystallized an ethical framework for the chivalric class, one that elevated respect for women and ideals of virtue as cornerstones of knightly identity. The intellectual roots of a Queen. Eleanor's intellectual foundation was rare for her time, especially among noble women. She was educated in Latin, read classical texts, and was trained in the intricacies of law and politics. This grounding allowed her to communicate with theologians, scholars, and diplomats as an equal. Her intellectual rigor set a standard for other royal courts, encouraging literacy and learning as marks of capable rule, and foreshadowing the humanist values that would take hold in Europe centuries later. Eleanor and the shifting borders of Europe. The political map of Europe changed drastically during Eleanor's lifetime, and she was at the center of many of those shifts. Her marriage to Henry II created an empire that stretched across modern-day England and France, but her strategic interventions, marriages for her children, support for campaigns, peace treaties, altered boundaries, allegiances, and sovereignties. She was not only a witness to European realignment, she was its architect, moving the pieces in a feudal chess match that redefined continental power. A model for queenship. Later queens would model their reigns consciously or not on Eleanor's example. From Isabella of France to Elizabeth I, strong-willed women rulers found precedent in Eleanor's defiance of passivity. Her blend of cultural sophistication, political strategy, and personal strength created a durable archetype of queenly authority. Even into the modern era, her name has been invoked when describing sovereign women who lead with intelligence, dignity, and resolve. The woman who refused to vanish centuries after her death, Eleanor of Aquitaine still resists fading into the margins of history. Her tomb draws visitors, her life inspires novels and films, and her achievements prompt new scholarship. She is remembered not because she conformed to the expectations of her time, but because she transcended them. In doing so, she became not just a queen of her own era, but a legend for all time. The power behind the throne. Eleanor's political mastery was most evident in the way she exerted power indirectly when formal rule eluded her. Whether acting as regent, advisor, or dowager queen, she consistently shaped policy, influenced succession, and steered the direction of kingdoms. Her skill lay in wielding authority without alienating those in official positions of power, a delicate balance that only the most astute leaders could achieve. Eleanor never needed a crown on her head to be recognized as sovereign. Intergenerational influence. What made Eleanor unique among medieval figures was not just her own accomplishments, but the fact that she directly shaped 3 generations of European rulers. Her sons ruled England, her daughters reigned in Castile and Sicily, and her granddaughter Blanche became one of France's most capable queens. Eleanor's teachings, alliances, and expectations rippled through time, creating a lineage of formidable monarchs molded in her image. Literature and legend, from medieval romances to modern novels, Eleanor's story has become a canvas for imagination. Chroniclers of her own time couldn't resist dramatizing her boldness, and modern writers have continued that trend, blending fact with fiction. She has been portrayed as both heroine and villain, lover and warrior, saint and schemer. This duality speaks not to confusion, but to richness, the layers of meaning that her life offers to every age. Eleanor's enduring Eleanor's life offers more than historical interest. It provides timeless leadership lessons, adaptability in crisis, strategic foresight, emotional resilience, and the courage to challenge norms. These were her hallmarks. In a world that still debates the role of women in leadership, Eleanor remains a powerful counterargument to anyone who would draw limits based on gender. Her life teaches us that influence is often earned through consistency, clarity, and a refusal to accept imposed boundaries. Toward the 21st century and beyond, even today, Eleanor continues to inform conversations about queenship, diplomacy, feminism, and power. As societies re-evaluate historical narratives and highlight overlooked figures, Eleanor rises to the surface again and again, not merely as a relic of medieval royalty, but as a vibrant voice in the continuing dialogue of history. Her life reminds us that greatness doesn't always wear armor. It sometimes speaks softly, negotiates wisely, and outlasts its rivals through sheer endurance. Eleanor and the evolution of nobility. Eleanor's long reign witnessed a transformation in what it meant to be noble. Under her influence, nobility came to encompass not only martial valor but also courtly manners, intellectual pursuits, and refined taste. Her own court in Poitiers became a model for noble behavior across Europe, emphasizing literacy, musical talent, and artistic appreciation. Through her sons and daughters, this revised image of the nobility-less warlord, more cultured sovereign was diffused throughout the courts of England, France, and beyond. Bridging pagan and Christian traditions, the era of Eleanor's life was one of spiritual tension. As Europe increasingly adopted uniform Christian practice, while older folk traditions lingered, Eleanor, a devout Christian who nonetheless presided over a court rich in mythological allusions and symbolic pageantry, served as a bridge between the sacred and the secular. Her patronage of poets and philosophers, who borrowed freely from classical and pre-Christian sources, suggests an openness to blending faith with inherited cultural motifs, a practice that helped shape the humanistic stirrings of later centuries. Eleanor's role in shaping national memory, historical memory, often requires a figure who embodies a nation's past glories and struggles. In Eleanor, both England and France found such a figure. Her legacy is claimed in architectural monuments, royal lineage, literature, and modern public memory. Statues, plaques, historical trails, and museum exhibits across both countries continue to honor her. Each reinterpretation renews her position as a foundational character in the mythology of Western monarchy and the evolution of female political agency. The symbolism of Fontevraud Abbey, Deviot Abbey, Eleanor's final resting place, stands as more than a religious sanctuary. It is a symbol of her aspirations and vision. She chose to be buried in a place that housed both men and women, defying gendered separation in death, as she had in life. Her stone effigy, reading a book rather than clasping a rosary, proclaims her intellectual legacy. Fontevraud is not just her tomb, it is her monument to enduring thought, equality, and dynastic permanence. Eleanor, in popular culture today, from television series and films to podcasts and TikTok documentaries, Eleanor's story remains ever. Her life is reinterpreted for each generation. A warrior queen in one era, a feminist icon in another. Contemporary creators continue to find inspiration in her bold decisions and multifaceted character. That she continues to appear in diverse media, often introduced to entirely new audiences, is a testament to the narrative power of her legacy. Few medieval figures resonate so loudly in the age of global storytelling. Queenship, as before, understood that monarchy was not only a function of governance, it was also a stage. She choreographed her public image with care. Her clothing, her entrance to courts, even her silence could carry political weight. At a time when visual symbolism often spoke louder than decrees, Eleanor wielded appearance as a form of strategy. She set the tone for a performative style of queenship that combined majesty with message, influencing the visual language of royalty for centuries. Eleanor and the education of heirs. Eleanor took an active role in shaping the education of her children and grandchildren, ensuring they were not only well-versed in the arts of war and governance, but also schooled in literature, theology, and law. Her insistence on comprehensive instruction created well-rounded leaders, capable of navigating Europe's complex feudal landscape. She understood that literacy and learning were as vital to kingship as courage, and her emphasis on intellectual development helped anchor the Plantagenet dynasty in wisdom as well as strength. Eleanor and the Mediterranean world. While much of Eleanor's influence centered on France and England, her presence was also felt across the Mediterranean. Through marriage alliances and political correspondence, she shaped connections with Sicily, Byzantium, Castile, and the Crusader states. Her time in Antioch and her ties to southern Europe enabled her to act as a cultural and political conduit, linking northern courts with the intellectual and commercial vibrancy of the Mediterranean basin. Her world was not only feudal, it was global. Her enduring political blueprint. Eleanor's long life allowed her to test, refine, and preserve a flexible political strategy. She blended negotiation with confrontation, cultural patronage with military command, and family diplomacy with statecraft. Her model was not about rigid rule but adaptive leadership. Future queens and female rulers, Margaret of Anjou, Catherine de' Medici, Elizabeth, I would borrow from this blueprint, proving that power wielded with tact and intelligence could last beyond even the fiercest of opposition. Eleanor's place in the story of civilization. To speak of Eleanor of Aquitaine is to speak of the transition from medievalism to modernity. She embodied the contradictions and ambitions of her age: war and art, faith and rebellion, tradition and transformation. Her story remains one of the clearest examples of how an individual, especially a woman, could shape the course of a continent. In history's grand narrative, Eleanor is not a footnote, she is a chapter. Eleanor's view of justice, though records rarely capture medieval rulers' inner philosophies, Eleanor's decisions suggest a nuanced view of justice. She valued local laws and honored customary rights in her duchy, balancing them with the centralized authority expected of monarchy. Her judgments in land disputes, vassal obligations, and ecclesiastical tensions often leaned toward mediation over punishment. Justice, for Eleanor, was a stabilizing force and instrument to preserve loyalty and order, rather than impose fear. Eleanor's literary patronage. Eleanor's court became a wellspring of literary creation. She championed troubadours and poets, who expanded the themes of love, honor, and spiritual yearning. Her influence contributed to the emergence of the Romance genre, and many historians credit her with preserving oral and written traditions that would have otherwise vanished. Her support helped cultivate a shared European literary identity, one that gave voice to complex emotions and female perspective in a male-dominated canon. Gender, power, and the crown. Eleanor consistently challenged gender norms. As a queen who traveled with crusading armies and governed vast lands in her own right, she defied expectations of submission and silence, yet she did so within the structures of her time, never attempting to abolish hierarchy, but instead using her intelligence and charisma to navigate it. She redefined power as a woman's tool, not a man's burden, setting a precedent that women could rule not despite their gender, but through it. Political resilience in adversity. Eleanor's life was marked by extraordinary setbacks, exile, imprisonment, loss of loved ones, and dynastic infighting. Yet, she consistently re-emerged from political ruin with renewed influence. Her time in captivity did not break her, it refined her. She emerged not vengeful, but pragmatic, focused on legacy over retribution. This resilience, grounded in patience, strategic silence, and timing, became her greatest political weapon. The legacy of a legend. In the centuries since her death, Eleanor of Aquitaine has become larger than life. She is the subject of ballads, biographies, and historical epics. But beneath the legend lies a real woman, intelligent, audacious, flawed, and fearless. Her story endures because it was never static. She evolved, she endured, and she excelled. Through war and peace, motherhood and monarchy, Eleanor carved her name into the bedrock of Western history, not as a symbol, but as a sovereign. Eleanor and the seeds of Renaissance thought. Though centuries before the Renaissance, Eleanor's intellectual climate anticipated many of its values. Her promotion of reason, dialogue, and the arts helped establish a culture of inquiry and refinement. The poets, clerics, and thinkers she gathered laid early groundwork for humanism. In this sense, Eleanor's court was a precursor to the salons and academies of the Renaissance, demonstrating that cultural revolutions are often seeded long before they flower. Maritime trade and Aquitaine's prosperity. Eleanor's duchy benefited enormously from maritime trade. As Duchess of Aquitaine, she encouraged the expansion of port cities, such as La Rochelle, linking Aquitaine to Mediterranean and Atlantic networks. Her policies helped develop a merchant class that would grow in influence for generations. By prioritizing economic expansion and coastal security, Eleanor ensured Aquitaine's continued relevance, not just in court politics, but in the broader commercial currents of medieval Europe. A diplomatic balancing act, navigating loyalty between France and England, Eleanor often walked a diplomatic tightrope. She managed the dual identities of her territories with finesse, refusing to let national rivalries erode her regional autonomy. When tensions ran high, she was often the only person capable of negotiating without being dismissed as partisan. Her role as mediator between kings, princes, and church officials reflected her ability to preserve peace through pragmatism rather than ideology. The patroness and the patroness' reputation for elevating literary voices included the championing of lesser-known writers. While famous troubadours captured public imagination, many lesser scribes and clerks also found opportunity under her reign. She understood that literature, both elite and popular, molded cultural consciousness. In supporting not just the acclaimed, but the emerging, Eleanor fostered an inclusive literary environment, giving space for new genres and voices to arise. The timeless symbol of sovereignty in a time when power was transient and often brutal, Eleanor's rule stood apart for its coherence, longevity, and legacy. She embodied a rare blend of symbolism and substance. Her crown carried authority, but her actions gave it meaning. Centuries later, queens and presidents, artists and activists still invoke Eleanor's example to inspire leadership grounded in intellect, empathy, and resolve. Her sovereignty was not defined by conquest alone, but by the enduring strength of her vision. Chapter 84. Her impact on medieval women's roles. Eleanor's reign reshaped how women could function in positions of power. She challenged the idea that women's political influence should be exercised only behind the scenes. Instead, she stepped directly into the arena of leadership, lawmaking, and war. Subsequent noblewomen used Eleanor's life as a reference point. Queens like Margaret of Provence and Isabella of France took more assertive roles in governance, inspired consciously or unconsciously by Eleanor's precedent. In this sense, she became not just a ruler, but a role model. Chapter 85. The timelessness of her story. Eleanor's story continues to resonate because it is timeless. It is a story of resilience, agency, transformation, and legacy. She was a woman who moved across borders, generations, and expectations, always seeking to shape the world around her. Her life defies reduction. It contains multitudes, queen and rebel, lover and warrior, exile and icon. Eleanor reminds us that history is not merely a chain of events, but a web of personalities, ambitions, and visions that echo through time.